Good day. My name is David Wild, and this is part one of a three-part presentation on Chapter 17 on Control, Performance, and Quality from Connect Master Management 2.0. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to analyze the steps in the control process, to evaluate the different types of controls that organizations use. You'll be able to evaluate the balanced scorecard as a performance management system, to evaluate an organization's performance management system using the balanced scorecard, and finally, you'll be able to evaluate the overall effectiveness of performance management systems. So to begin, let's talk about the purposes of control. In complex organizations involved in many countries and product markets, having adequate controls in place is essential to implementing strategies effectively. There are many areas and types of controls that might be needed to ensure that the firm produces successful products and services, and that it is productive as it can be. Several years ago, Kansas City Power and Light found the metrics they used in their business, such as outage durations, customer satisfaction, and others, didn't really reflect the firm's overall strategy. There were missing links between the firm's strategy, its execution, and the measurement of the organization's performance. Management worked for more than a year to develop more cohesive metrics, and to link the metrics they track with the firm's strategy, and finally, to ensure that the metrics are connected with the daily activities of its employees. Takeaways from Kansas City Power and Light's organizational change experience include that one should keep it simple, so categorize metrics as simply as possible, that more is better, to assess performance frequently, to make sure that employees are focused, and that winning is good, and make sure that the company culture reinforces positive changes. One should share the news. You should communicate at all levels of the organization about the changes. And finally, you should connect the dots. At Kansas City Power and Light, performance scorecards were linked at all levels of the organization, which helped managers and employees to identify even more areas for improvement. So from a definitional perspective, organizational control is a process of monitoring performance, comparing actual results against desired targets, and then taking corrective actions. So why does organizational control matter? Organizational control has a number of important purposes. To begin with, organizational control helps to ensure that a strategy is implemented effectively. Now, control isn't just about the past, but also about the future. An organization that is, quote, out of control will not be effective in reaching its desired ends, and the means to the ends it puts in place as part of its strategy, i.e. the resources it allocates or the actions that it takes in the market, will have unpredictable results. Second, when results fall short of targets, managers can respond in two ways related to strategy formulation and implementation. First, they can make changes to actually improve operations. Secondly, companies might also revisit their strategy more fundamentally and ask if it is effective or if the strategy should be modified. Leaders can also use control systems to empower and to develop employees. When targets are set and cascaded down in the organization to departments, teams, and to individual employees, everyone knows what is expected of them and that they will be held accountable. Organizational controls can also be important in detecting and responding to technical problems and issues related to both legal and ethical compliance. So, in summary, talking about the purposes of control, organizational control exists to ensure that strategies are executed well so organizations can survive and prosper. Organizational control is a process of monitoring performance, comparing results against expectations, and taking corrective action as needed. Controls help organizations know how they are performing and whether changes are needed to get firms back on track. The demands on managers are increasing because of the complexity of the external environment and the many, often conflicting demands that stakeholders place on them. Designing organizational controls forces executives to be clear about their strategies. Organizational controls also help managers implement and even change strategies if they are not hitting the targets they set. Finally, organizational controls can be important for the development and empowerment of employees who take initiative as well as accountability for their performance. They can also be critical to the legal and ethical compliance of the organization. Now, let's talk about the steps in the control process. Control in organizations is achieved through a series of steps that represent a process of control. As you can see, the control process is displayed in Figure 1 that you see on your screen as a four-step process. To begin with, it is important to establish clarity on the desired outcomes for an organization and the means to those ends. This is the function of strategy, and it is an important input to the process of control. Control, therefore, needs to be seen as serving the organization's vision, strategy, and planning processes more broadly. Now, let's talk about devising metrics and targets for control. Standards need to be developed, and this step in the control process involves devising the metrics that will be used and the particular target for each metric. Metrics are often referred to as key performance indicators, or KPIs, which will be used to judge whether or not the organization is in fact on track. KPIs can be set for the organization as a whole, for departments, or for even teams and down to the individual level. Management by objectives, or MBO, involves departmental goals and action plans. Individuals' progress toward their goals is periodically reviewed and then feedback is offered. These reviews also provide the basis for performance-based rewards for managers. For goals to be effective, each of them should satisfy several criteria. First, goals should be specific, indicating what needs to be accomplished. Goals should be measurable. You can't manage what you don't measure. Goals should be time-bound, specifying a deadline for accomplishment. Goals should be challenging, but realistic. Such goals tend to be motivating for employees, whereas easy or unrealistic goals are not motivational. Goals should be written and communicated to the appropriate personnel. And finally, goals should be understandable and acceptable to key stakeholders. And now on to collecting data and measuring performance. After metrics and targets have been developed, managers will collect information over time to compare actual performance, whether of an employee, a team, a department, or the organization as a whole, against the expected performance. There are a variety of methods used for collecting this information, including surveys, personal observations, and written reports. The use of surveys, both internal and external, allows the organization to determine how satisfied customers are with its performance. Although subjective, such information can be valuable to determine how the market perceives the organization and its employees. Personal observations. This method provides direct information about the performance of an employee, but does have drawbacks such as subjectivity or limited time for observation. Similarly, managers can use reports by others, including immediate supervisors, peers, or subordinates, and this feedback might be obtained in an anonymous, confidential way from those reporting to the employee. Finally, there are written reports. Some measures of performance that are statistical or derived from objective data are contained in statistical analyses or in financial and accounting statements. Regardless of the source of the information on performance, the actual performance is then compared against the targeted expected level of performance. This allows managers to calculate a performance variance or deviation. The principle of comparing actual and targeted performance and managers being informed only when variances are outside the acceptable range of variation is known as management by exception. The manager then needs to make a decision on what to do with this information. You can see on your screen a daily sales report on 2 products and then a lunchtime daily sales report. What strikes you from comparing those 2 reports? Well, if you look at it, look at the sales of product A. As you can see, that's a hot item. All of it sells by midday at the store. So the sales of product A are far different than the sales of product B, which occur throughout the day. Taking corrective action. When actual and expected performance differ, managers can do a number of things. First, they might decide to do nothing or to collect more information, rather than to take any immediate action. Second, when actual performance is higher than expected performance, managers might wish to acknowledge this by commending an employee or group and might offer rewards, such as individual raises, or provide additional resources to the group by increasing its budget. On the other hand, when actual performance falls short of targets, they might encourage employees to get additional training, develop performance improvement plans, or they might take disciplinary action. So in summary on the control process, key performance indicators, or KPIs, and targets are the most basic elements of performance management systems. They are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. In other words, SMART. When organizations set targets, they can look to historical performance, or they can look to competitors and perform benchmarking to set challenging targets for employees. The metrics and targets managers choose should match the overall strategy of the organization. Then, managers use internal data and reports, surveys, or personal observations to measure performance and see if it meets targets. They will look for variances between actual and expected performance. They might also use other quantitative or qualitative information to understand the root causes of performance variances. When performance exceeds targets, managers might reward employees or provide additional resources to a team. On the other hand, when performance falls short of targets, they might encourage employees to get additional training, to develop performance improvement plans, or to take disciplinary actions. And with that, we end part 1 of the 3-part lecture on Chapter 17 on control, performance, and quality.